Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So just wanted to pick up where I left off in my last video. I talked about what it was like for me and my experience with my teenager returning home with family and just kind of building off of where I left off. So one thing I don't think I mentioned in the previous video was that when that decision was made that she be placed with a family member immediately that day in court that we did not attend, was that I was told by the professionals involved that that was supposed to be a temporary 60-day trial. And so I chose to not take any future placement calls for other kids until that 60 days was up, trying to leave time and provisions for that teenager to be able to return to my care, to my home, if something came up within that 60 days. Now, I don't know if this is the case in every state, but where I'm at in South Carolina, um, you'll often find that court dates um, don't always happen in a timely frame, a timely uh, time frame as far as like they told me 60 days, and although we'll go back to court at the end of that 60 days and reevaluate. Well, 60 days came and went. There was never another court date in place. And it kept dragging out and out and out. And so I had already been wrestling with for quite some time, possibly moving. At the time, I was in a little 2-bedroom apartment and had started searching at houses for rent in my area so that I could provide more space so that I could leave my home open and have a room for the teenager in case she needed to come back, but also be able to move forward with my foster care journey and take other placement calls. And again, for me, this whole foster care experience has been a very spiritual one in that I felt God's leading in a lot of things, whether it be to say yes or no to a placement call, or even with the teenager. I mean, I wasn't signed up to take teenage placements when I received that call. My family specialist with my licensing agency just took a chance and asked me if I'd be interested because she felt like this teenager and I would get along very well and that we had a lot in common, which I'm so glad she did. And I'm so thankful now that I trusted the Lord's leading to say yes to her, because it's been one of the most rewarding and fulfilling experiences that I've had in my foster care journey. So, you know, I just encourage you to, I think I've said in other videos, but, don't restrict yourself. The only limits you have in this journey are the ones you put on yourself or the ones you accept for yourself. So just remain open to where God leads you in this journey, and what you feel called to do. But I'm forever thankful. And because I said yes to that placement, I ended up opening my license to all age ranges and have not confined myself to just that 0 to 5 age range anymore. And again, that all worked out in my favor, as you'll see. But it definitely opened doors that might not have otherwise had I stayed in that restrictive age range. And so, after court being delayed for several months and not really knowing what was going to happen with her case, I decided it was time to take that plunge forward and make a move. And so, in January of 2022, I moved into a 4-bedroom house in the same city that I was currently living in. And that way I was able to remain with my same licensing agency and all of that. But let me tell you, that was a whole process in itself. So not only you as a foster parent are licensed and background checked and approved, but your home itself has to be approved. So that was one thing that was surprisingly difficult in the moving process. So not to say I won't move again during this, but definitely will think long and hard about it, because everything that you do in that initial licensing stage to get your home approved, you have to redo with a new home. So everything from the fire marshal inspection to walkthrough visits from the licensing agency, having your room set up, having your chemicals stored appropriately, having, safe sleep spaces set up for different rooms, that kind of thing. And while all of that was not as big of a nightmare as far as the room set up and having enough to accommodate and fill the rooms for to potentially take multiple kids, because I was blessed in the fact that I did an initial like online expecting parent baby shower type thing when I started fostering, and I have had an enormous outpouring of support and people that donated clothes, beds, cribs, all kinds of things. So I had more than enough to fill all of my rooms and set up multiple rooms for multiple different age ranges. So for that, I'm forever grateful. And if you're one of those people who contributed to that, I can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for assisting in that process. So, and again, some of those things when I was doing the room videos, all those things that can be converted into multiple uses, all that was helpful in moving and being able to manipulate and customize rooms for different age ranges. Again, I think the most crucial part of any of that was the convertible bed, being able to transfer from a full-size bed to a crib to a toddler bed, that kind of thing. So, highly recommend investing in a convertible bed if fostering is something you're interested in, and especially if you plan to have kind of a wide range of ages. But the biggest hurdle was the fire inspection. So the first time around, when I got initially licensed in 2020, felt like it was pretty easy. Fire marshal was very accommodating as far as did basic walkthrough safety checks and checked smoke detectors and water temperature, things like that. Well, I don't know if it was just because I was in a different area, but again, it was the same county, so I'm not sure it was even from a different district, so to speak, when it comes to fire marshals. I'm not sure how that works, but, and I'm not saying anything bad about the fire marshal that came out, but he was just a lot more in depth, I guess, about specifics. And there was even some things that were conflicting about the original guidelines I'd received about what was needed to be approved by the fire marshal. For example, in some of the paperwork, it says that you have to have so many square of open space for your windows. And in my initial fire marshal visit when I got licensed originally, they said that was the open square feet of space in front of a window so that you could access the window to get out in case of a fire. This fire marshal said, nope, that's the actual like measurement perimeters of how wide your window opens, and that square footage. And if it's below a certain square footage, that's when your your smoke detectors have to be interconnected. And so the fire, so I keep saying fire alarms, but it's smoke detectors that were originally in this house were not interconnected. And so the first visit, obviously, when he said that that was the case, even though I had open floor space in front of the window, he said that was not sufficient. That because the windows were actually too small, the opening, and didn't meet that square footage, then I needed interconnected smoke detectors. So I had to kind of restart and order interconnected smoke detectors, which basically what that means is if one goes off, they all go off. And just a word of warning, something I learned from this is, so there's several different smoke detectors that have interconnected in the description. And so the first round that I bought said interconnected, and had the fire marshal come back out, thought everything was good to go. Turns out they're not interconnected to each other. The device itself has a smoke detector and a carbon monoxide detector that are interconnected. And so if one alarm goes off, then the other alarm goes off, but just on the individual device. Just FYI, just trying to save you some hassle. Make sure you read the full details. Because one thing I also ran into is that, it's funny now, but it was very frustrating at the time. That smoke detectors are a non-returnable item. I ordered mine off of Amazon, and so I'm not sure if that's the case everywhere, but on Amazon it was an item that could not be returned. And so even though I had ordered the wrong thing, and these things aren't cheap, like $80 to $100 a pop, and I had to have enough for each of the bedrooms, so that's four, one for the kitchen and hallway, that kind of thing. And so therefore, uh, I ended up spending lots of extra money ordering the wrong smoke detectors and not being able to get my money back. Now, though, I will say, blessing in disguise, I actually had a friend who was looking to replace her smoke detectors in her home, was not a foster parent, did not matter the quality or the specific specs of the device. And so, for a discounted price, she actually bought those interconnected carbon monoxide smoke detectors off me. And so I was able to gain a little bit of money back that way. And credit to my mom, too. She also helped reimburse some of that cost and helped me order the new correct ones, because when the fire marshal was out that time, then he said, oh, these are not the right ones. I said, well, please show me on your phone specifically online on Amazon which ones I need to order. And he was able to do that for me and screenshot it and text it to me, so that way I could then go on Amazon and order the correct ones. And I had a lot of trouble mounting them. I mean, it was just a whole process. And so I think the fire marshal was out at least 3 times, maybe 4, before I ever passed that inspection. And so I moved in January. I think all those inspections took place like in February. And then because it's a new home, we had to actually wait for the state to issue a new license that said this was a licensed foster home, because it was at a new address. And so then again, we're kind of back to square one of like when you originally get licensed, it can take up to 60 days for the state to approve it. And so I knew going into it that it was going to probably be, April before that was approved. And so now I had waited from September when my teenager went home, and now I was looking at going all the way into April before I would be able to take another placement. Well, lo and behold, in March of that year of 21, or I'm sorry, 22, because my teenager left in September of 21. And so in March of 22, after I had just moved in January of 22, I actually, the very first week of March, got a phone call for a placement, and it was actually my original placement I had from 2020. So the then 4-year-old in 2020, who was now 5, and gonna be 6 later that year in 2022, had come back into care, and they called me originally and wanted me to take her and her 2 younger brothers and placing me with a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And I do, in case you don't remember, do this as a single parent. So of course, initially I was like, oh wow, I don't know how I feel about me versus 3. And I prayed over it so much, and really, really, truly considered it, to be honest. And basically what it boiled down to, I just kept praying, Lord, if I don't need to take all 3, please just let there be something outside of my control that would make it not possible. And so what it boiled down to was they all 3 had to still be in car seats or booster seats, and my vehicle would only accommodate 2 seats and not 3. And so then they started looking at alternate placement and were able to place the 2 younger brothers together in a home, which left just my foster daughter needing placement. And so I got to again just take her, which worked out beautifully, and I'm so glad it did now because of so many details that I will get into a little bit later. But yeah, so that was my experience trying to move and get a new foster license reissued in the midst of still a pending license approval. And so just to speak to that, they were able to get the state to sign off on a temporary like grant waiver that would allow me to take her as a placement until they issued my official license. And so it was still approved by the state. They didn't place her with me without an active license because I was still actively licensed at my old address. But they were able to give me a waiver until my new home was signed off on. And so that first week of March, I was able to welcome her back into my home. and then a journey of lots of drama and therapy and court and hassles and just fear, sadness, anger, joy, everything unfolded before my eyes over the next 9 months as she was with me. And I will dive a little deeper into what all that looked like and the challenges we faced, and as much as I can possibly share about her case, to kind of hopefully share some support if you're going through a similar situation. And if not, just kind of a heat of warning and a heads up that these things do happen. So stay tuned for a further update on how all of that played out. And thanks again for watching. God bless.